So now it is my pleasure to introduce the mastermind behind tonight's panel, Sharon Louden. Originally from Philadelphia and raised outside of DC, Louden received her BFA from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and her MFA from Yale University. Since graduating from Yale, her work has been exhibited in numerous venues, including the Aldrich Contemporary Art Museum, the Drawing Center, Carnegie Mellon University, Birmingham Museum of Art, Wetherspoon Art Museum, and the Kemper Museum of Contemporary Art. Her work is held in major public and private collections, including the Neuberger Museum of Art, the Whitney Museum of American Art, the National Gallery of Art, and the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, among others. She currently teaches at the New York Academy of Art, where she organizes a popular lecture series, and at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design. The book, Living and Sustaining a Creative Life, is now in its 5th printing since its first run sold out before its official release.
Congratulations.
On October 15, 2013.
Well
It has been the #1 on Amazon's bestseller list, and we do have it for sale today, and she'll be signing it following today's event. Tonight's conversation will last approximately 45 minutes with a chance for questions and answers, about 15 minutes worth, followed by some book sales and an opportunity to get it signed. So everybody make sure your cell phones are silenced, and help me welcome Sharon Louden.
I just want to say it's very special to be here. Christine, thank you, because I taught here years ago. And so the first time I came back here was in January when we did a book event, and they were so kind to invite us back. I do want to say that this is being recorded. The 92nd Street Y is going to have that recording, and we go out into the world through the 92nd Street Y, I'm assuming the website, right? The website. But it's been amazing to meet thousands of people on this book tour and hear all different voices. So we have accumulated all of that footage, and that will, including this, will go out into the world. So without further ado, I would like to introduce these really exceptional people. Adam Sheffer is a partner at Chime & Reed, a New York-based gallery founded in 1997, and is dedicated to the promotion of modern and contemporary art. The gallery represents an eclectic group of artists, among them the estate of Louise Bourgeois, William Eggleston, Jenny Holzer, the estate of Joe Mitchell, and Sean Scully. No, Sean Scully, yes? Mm-hmm. Okay. Mr. Sheffer, Adam also currently serves as the Vice President of the Art Dealers Association of America, as well as the Chairman of the art show held at the Park Avenue Armory every March. Adam holds a BA degree in studio art from Vassar College, which is actively involved in the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, and the Colby College Museum of Art in Waterville, Maine, and the Norton Museum of Art in Palm Beach, Florida. In 2013, Adam established the Chameleon Scholarship Fund at Concord Academy in Massachusetts, which provides financial aid to art students of kind heart, open mind, and a sense of humor. Wonderful. To his right is Will Cotton, and Will is, I should say too, Adam is a contributor to the back cover of my book. He gave this wonderful quote for the back cover. Will Cotton is a contributor, and you can read his essay in Living and Sustaining Creative Life. Will Cotton is an artist who was born in Melrose, Massachusetts, and raised in New Paltz, New York. He has a BFA from Cooper Union in New York City. Is there a problem with the microphone? Okay. But I'm loud and clear, so you can probably hear me very well. And also studied, can you hear me? Yeah. He studied in France and at the New York Academy of Art as well. Will Cotton has been represented by Mary Boone Gallery since 1999, which is here in New York. He also exhibits with Baldwin Gallery in Aspen, Michael Cohn Gallery in Los Angeles, Gallery Daniel Templon in Paris, France, and also several other galleries, including Jablonka Gallery, is that correct? In Cologne, Germany. I'm so sorry. And his work is in the collections of the National Portrait Gallery, DC, and Smithsonian Art Museum, Seattle Art Museum, Columbia Museum of Ohio, in Ohio, as well as many other private collections. Welcome.
Thank you.
Will, it's great to see you.
Thank you, Sharon.
And then Benjamin Genocchio is an Australian-born nonfiction writer, art critic, and editor, now residing here in New York. You are here in New York. Benjamin was born in Sydney, New South Wales, and attended the Newington College. Is that correct? Newington College?
Yeah, when I was 14. That's all right.
You graduated in 1986. There you go. He studied arts and law at the University of Sydney and later completed a PhD in art history. Wow, you're a doctor. Dr. Benjamin. He began his career in journalism in his native Australia, writing for Business Review Weekly, a weekly business and politics magazine. He later wrote art criticism for The Bulletin, a weekly current affairs magazine, and then in 1997 being appointed as the Sydney art critic for the Australian, Australia's national daily newspaper. He rose rapidly to become the paper's chief art critic and later the national arts correspondent, covering art and culture in Australia and abroad. He was twice shortlisted for the Pascal Prize, Australia's premier prize for cultural criticism. He has formerly worked for the New York Times as an art critic, and then also as editor-in-chief of Art Auction magazine and Modern Painters magazine, as well as the website artinfo.com. But he's currently the editor-in-chief of the Art World News website, Art News, which is pretty cool.
No, ArtNet News.
ArtNet News. Is that not right? ArtNet News. Is it ArtNet News a magazine or ArtNet News?
ArtNet's a website, but
Right.
we bolted on like a Bloomberg news service.
Bloomberg News.
Yeah.
Very, very important reference.
Oh, that was good. Did you do that on purpose? Say that on purpose? Okay, so, and then you're also the author of 7 or 8 books.
Too many to count.
7 or 8 books.
Yeah.
And so, welcome, Benjamin. And finally, Kathleen Hayes is here to moderate this conversation.
That's all you need to know.
No, can I just say a little bit about you? Kathleen has covered the U.S. economy and the Federal Reserve for more than 20 years. She joined Bloomberg in 2006 after years as an on-air and online economics correspondent at CNN, CNN-FN, and CNNBC, where she served as host. The Hayes Advantage is a weekday program that brings in-depth insight and analysis to important economic and market and policy issues. And every Friday, she has an art segment. And if you had the opportunity to hear her program, you heard myself and Benjamin today talk with Kathleen this afternoon, which was fantastic. So today was the exception.
Well, of course, today we were doing the business of art.
Right, we do the business of
And
art.
art as a commodity and all of that. So it was a debate. Anyway, we may get a bit of that tonight.
It was a debate.
It was. You and Benjamin kind of.
I know, I was worried he was
differently.
mad at me when he walked in the door. And I'm grateful that you're taking this on, and thank you everyone for being here. It's
Yes,
wonderful.
and it's so terrific to be here at the 92nd Street Y, such a, just an historic, august place to be part of this lovely evening. Very honored to be on this panel. And I just want to start by asking, maybe it's an obvious question, but first of all, how many people here are artists? I'm assuming there's lots. Okay. How many people like art and like to go to museums? There's your hand on that one. Okay, so there we go. Okay, well, I want to start by asking Sharon, and again, Sharon was first on my show about 6 months ago when she was starting to publicize the book, and a mutual friend of ours, who I didn't know was a mutual friend, who is a terrific genius, kind of critical about the economy and policy, et cetera, kind of guy on Wall Street, is also collects art. And he kept telling me, you have to have this woman on your show, this book. And I was like, okay. So finally we got Sharon on, and so I read the book, and it's such an interesting, inspiring book. I'm a journalist, I'm not really an artist, but it made me kind of think about my own life and how I live it. Anyway, first question to you, Sharon. Why was it so important for you to do this book? What is it that people don't know? What was the question that you needed to answer?
I think there are several things. I teach at the New York Academy of Art, as Christine mentioned, and many students would always, actually they would a lot come to me, always, I wouldn't say always, but a lot of the time come to me and say, how do I make a living? I need to find a gallery, in the same sentence. And I sort of just got annoyed with that. I mean, I love galleries. I mean, I said Adam is one of my dearest friends. I'm nothing against them. And from my radio program, you might hate me after that. But I think from the radio program today. But I think that they're very important to the ecosystem of the art world. However, I don't think that they should be dependent on. And so I thought, why don't I get 40 people together to talk about all the different ways in which artists can sustain a creative life? And by doing that, it sort of created also sort of bottled up what the identity is of a contemporary artist today through these 40 stories. Some of them start a conversation, and then some of them are completely transparent, where they sort of say as much as you want to hear about that person. So that's why I sort of did it. I wanted to give back to say, let's talk about the different ways in which artists can sustain a creative life, but also let's open up the conversation about money in the art world, and artists don't really talk about that, nor do they share, I think, a lot or as much as I think they should, different opportunities to be able to sustain a life.
So I want to go next to you, Will. You're in the book, and you are an artist. To tell us a little bit about the choice you made when you, or any artist makes, when you're following your artistic, path and inspiration, and you're really known for all your cool sweet work, your candy work, right? And you were the artistic director on the piece that Katy Perry did because they saw your work and loved it, and that's your hallmark. Now, some people might say, wow, why would you do that? How would you know, quote unquote, that you're going to be able to sustain your creative life? And speak to that question. You're very successful now, starting out, how you made those choices, and how difficult or easy it's been to sustain your creative life.
Okay, I'm going to start with the choices part, which incidentally doesn't ever feel like a choice. I don't feel like I sat down one day and said, okay, this is going to be my thing, and I'm going to do it for the next 3 decades. So far, I guess almost 2. You could say that my work has been thematically similar. But I never know if that's going to change tomorrow, and I don't. It's important to me not to lock myself into anything like that. I think there was another part of your question.
Well, but it makes me think of sometimes when I'm a journalist and I'm more and more reporting on the art world, sometimes I feel it's like high school, like oh, who's popular? And that's whose work may end up going for a lot of money, right? And that's one of the frustrations of artists. You might have some beautiful work, but you're not one of the in kids, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the challenges of being an artist who can do their art and make a decent living.
Well, yeah, I should say, to further explain what that process feels like to me, I'm going to jump back to about 1994, when I was getting interested in advertising and desire and how desire is incited within people. And I worked through a number of ways of speaking about that in art, mostly with ad icons like the Pillsbury Doughboy and Green Giant and those things. But more and more I found that sweets were representative of this aspect of desire that exists only for pleasure. And that, I guess, did feel like a moment to me. It felt like, yes, that's it. That's my metaphor. And I can use that to talk about a lot of different things. And I had incidentally found a Candyland board that I played as a child. Beyond that, now we're talking mid-90s, I didn't know that I'd do more than one painting like that. But it becomes a question of following the thread and asking myself the next question.
So let's go to you, Adam, to bring the question out. Now you play such an important role. You're a partner at a major art dealer here in New York City. You spent many years doing this. How do you see your role? And of course, you're sustaining your own creative life, because the life of the dealer is also creative, and it's also one of the parts of this world, right? So maybe we'll start there with you. In the choices you've made and the choices you continue to make as you select art to represent at the gallery, you got to sustain it, you got to make the money and sell it. At the same time, you've got to sustain the creativity.
Back in college, I wanted to be a painter, and I realized, unlike Will, that I had no compelling need or reason to be making paintings. Simply, it was an interesting vocation to me. I was fortunate enough to be raised in Boston, where we had a great museum, and I spent a lot of time there as a child because I was a terrible athlete. And my parents said, if you play this sport in the afternoon, we'll take you to the museum. So that's how it all started. I was very fortunate that I was better at articulating the strengths of my colleagues and my classmates' work than it was making my own. And she very kindly organized the introduction to an internship in New York, which would take the time that I would otherwise be spending in the studio. So it all kind of very organically happened, and I'm very grateful that it did. You know, the way I look at it, this is a partnership. It's a marriage between an artist and a dealer. I call myself a dealer instead of a gallerist because I think that's a very kind of Eurocentric term. It's probably more appropriate coming from a certain tradition, but to me it sounds more like a psychiatrist than an art dealer, which I am a little bit of as well, but it's a marriage, and it's a marriage by which it's a series of compromises. And marriage, this sort of segues into what Sharon's book was about. For somebody who's been married for 18 years, I can tell you marriage is not for everybody. And gallery relationships are not for everybody. And everything that I do during the course of the day is to promote the careers and the lives of the artists that we work with. And sometimes you have to, as Jenny Holzer said best, protect me from what I want. And that works with both dealers and artists. I think, unfortunately, these days, there is so much attention that is paid to the prices for art and the value of art that I would like to see the entire art world get out of this numbers and square footage game and start thinking about things that are really important. And I think that's something that we could collectively address in the future. And I think you would make the whole experience it would go down a lot easier for especially younger artists who are quite intimidated by all these questions that Sharon continues to address at the New York Academy of Art or at the College of Minneapolis.
So Benjamin, to you, and you started out kind of where I still am, right? You studied journalism, and your first job was in business and finance, and I think in so many ways that would be such a great background for going into the art world, right? Because you're covering all aspects of it, but this is the commerce of art, and this addresses the question of living, how you're going to live a life as an artist is something you've been observing so closely. So where are we now? Where is the art world now, particularly when you address this question of, okay, you want to do your art and be true to it, but you want to make a living?
I guess unlike the other panelists, I never went to an art school, so in that sense, I'm a little bit like a priest in a strip club. I'm sort of very interested, but I can't quite participate. The extent to which my observations are valid or pertinent, I'll let you decide. But to respond to your question, what interests me today is that I think there are many ways of being an artist, actually, and as the world changes, one of the most creative aspects of the lives we build are to search for strategies of being creative. Now, an old-fashioned idea of an artist might be someone had a studio that looked for a dealer, that sold paintings to a collector, and ultimately had a museum show. But I actually think that there are many, many different strategies for being a successful artist today. So in a strange way, I'm actually very much a public optimist when it comes to the opportunities of living a creative life. And I'll just give you an example of something that I'm sort of very interested in, but again, sort of as a curiosity, is the way in which this whole generation of street artists are able to make a living and generate so much publicity for themselves, basically through having no studio, no dealer, essentially no collectors, but have managed to generate, in the case, obviously you've heard of Banksy, but female Banksy, Bambi. There's a whole, almost a generation of them. And so I think there are these incredibly, there are people that are finding and making new strategies for being artists and are being very successful at it. So I would just encourage you to think critically about the kind of the resources and the opportunities you have, and to tailor the idea of being an artist to what you have at hand, and treat that as a creative enterprise. Because I do think there are a number of models, or a number of very successful people out there, in ways that it's almost improbable, given what the system is.
Sharon, go ahead. Yeah.
No,
You go, all right, I thought, okay. Well, then I want to, this makes me think of disruptors, and in so many industries and in parts of our lives now, people talk about disruptors. Uber's a disruptor. Every time we turn around, there's another disruptor, and they're good because they they permit new ways for people to do things and have access to things they wouldn't have, or they be more efficient, whatever, some exciting new thing. So what is the disruptor right now in the art world? Because you, for example, are selling art online. ArtNet, not you, but ArtNet is.
I don't sell anything, I'm terrible.
Yeah, but ArtNet does, right? Auctions are part of it.
I run a news business, which is, I do sort of one thing reasonably.
Well, whatever you're doing, it's being done.
Okay, it's being done.
Art is being sold online,
Yes,
and I mean,
indeed.
I never thought that kitty litter would be sold online. You know, it's way too heavy. How could you put that? I mean, or cars. A lot of people buy fancy old cars for lots of money. They don't even drive them before they buy them. And I think when you talk about ways that younger artists, or even anybody who's an artist now, still practicing art. So I want everybody to sort of address that question in your own way. You know, and let's start this time with you, Will, because you were with a gallery. So Sharon, you guys don't need to sell art online, I suppose, but in your own work or or people around you, are things changing in ways that are going to give more people access in ways they haven't had?
I'm actually going to go back to my personal experience with being a young artist and working outside the gallery system, which was, I had just graduated from art school, moved upstate, and made a bunch of paintings, and had nowhere to show them, so I literally borrowed a friend's barn and hung them all up in the barn, invited everyone I knew, and I sold them for $250, for $575, and I made some money. I didn't use that system. I'm just going to bring up Instagram. It's not a commercial enterprise as far as I can tell, but it's been a very important visual tool for a lot of artists I know, including myself. I think of it as an almost daily virtual studio visit. I tend to post a lot of pictures in progress. My Instagram name is Will Cotton NYC. It's interested. I mean, I've had a little experience.
Can I interrupt? What's the value of posting a painting in progress? That's interesting to me.
Yeah, studio visits are time-consuming and annoying, and yet, I think it's very important that, particularly with my work, which has a very high degree of finish, that I can show people out there how it gets made. I think that's interesting. And I think it's interesting enough to put some time into, and it also happens to be a thoroughly non-commercial enterprise. Although I think I did sell a painting like that one time. So
Let's.
Well, Richard Prince is selling Instagram photos.
well, that's
I mean,
yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
And Instagram sold itself to.
But he's selling them in a gallery.
In a gallery.
What I find so interesting about this is, maybe I'm old-fashioned. I mean, I do have an Instagram account, and I do social media, which I think is extremely interesting and important. And it would be like, hundreds of years ago, not wanting to get in a car because you simply, didn't know what it was about. For me, it always comes back to the artist. Anytime an artist recommends an artist to me, it's worth me taking the time to either look at their work online or make a studio visit. Some of the best recommendations I've gotten from people I've never heard of, I promise you've never heard of, but I've been to their studio, is by that face-to-face interaction. And this comes from everything from artists who take on artists as studio assistants through listings at NYFA. It comes through being in the Irving Sandler, we used to have slides, I don't know what it's called now, files at Artist Space. It comes from getting jobs as artist assistants, and then the artist will tell me, you should really look at this guy who's working with me, he's kind of interesting, he's going to be in this group show. Or artists who go to group shows in Bushwick or the Lower East Side and say, wow, I saw this young kid at MoMA, you should check it out. For me, the best recommendation I can get about an artist is from another artist, always. So while we do, have these outlets like artnet.com and Artsy, etc., it's that kind of recommendation from somebody that I already have a relationship with. We already have this sense of trust. We already have this appreciation of the quality of what the other were to look at. When an artist tells me to go, I do. And that's the best recommendation for me to find emerging artists that we may not take on in the gallery, but it's good for me to know about. You never know what kind of group show or word of mouth this could lead to, or something that I see and I ask them, hey, is it okay if I Instagram this? This is pretty cool. But for me, it's all about that human relationship, because the entire business is based on human relationships.
I think that tied into what you just said, but also back to what Benjamin was saying, I think that there are many, many forums now to bring out all the different ways in which artists can sustain a life. But I think that what I've noticed on this book tour is that more and more artists are not just staying in their studio and, and I said this at the Strand, when we were at the Strand, maybe they don't have like a driver or a yacht, and they don't, or aren't uber wealthy, and they don't have a chef. And I think a lot of artists wear more and more multiple hats. And so I like to call them more culture producers, people who do many different things. I mean, take Michelle Grabner, who started 2 nonprofit organizations. She's the mother of 3 children. She's married to an artist. She was the chair of the School of the Art Institute of Chicago's painting department. And she writes and curates. She does all different things. While that is not a new thing, I do think that it's more and more that artists have to do different things, actually. That I don't think, and as you said, that the gallery is just a partner in the whole equation, what you had mentioned, that's a partnership. And so I think that the most important thing for me to stress is that artists can reach for different things, and it is a different time. I think it's the best time to be an artist because there's so many different opportunities. I mean, Benjamin, would you agree with that? You're the optimist.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of Theaster Gates and what he's done in inner city Chicago. Basically, his project, he's just rebuilding schools, libraries, taking derelict buildings, raising money, renovating them, putting families in them. I mean, who would have thought that could have been a creative project? His creative project there is basically is an urban revitalization of the place in which he grew up.
But do you, as the editor-in-chief of ArtNet News, do you prefer to write about those artists? Is that part of your criteria? Well, or do you, but you also talk a lot about the marketplace, and that's hugely emphasized. And so you're talking about this sort of the alternative of what artists do.
Well, not really. He shows with White Cube. Where was I? I was a couple of years back in Basel. There was a UBS sponsored talk. Theaster Gates was there, a room full of wealthy and other people. Look, there's a difference between sort of what I do in terms of writing and, my creative life is heavily caffeinated. So that's how I do what I do, is stimulants. But beyond that, the kind of particular demands, and you'll understand this better, the business of journalism as a business has very specific demands about the way in which content's packaged and presented, the kinds of stories, the narratives, the way in which you present it to an audience. And to some extent, that over-determines the presentation of art in media context. People in the art world or education world, they approach it very differently, and they assume that somehow they want to know why the media doesn't present it in the way that they understand it. And that's because people working in the media have a boss, have deadlines,
and also, I think one of the entry points for people who aren't in the art world is the eye-popping story. Oh my God, someone just bought that painting for $150 million, right? So that creates the news headline that will grab a lot of eyeballs, and you could say, well, darn. That on the one hand, if you want people to pay more attention to art, sometimes that's what's going to make them pay more attention. And maybe, ideally then, it is the entree to get the bug somehow. That then you're more interested in that cool kid with no money who's doing something that everybody in this hip art world is suddenly paying attention to.
Yeah, and it certainly created a monster. I mean, I can barely go to MoMA these days. I mean, there's like 50,000 people in there. I mean, you can't see a painting for the people. And so, you know, in a way, that monster, I mean, you know, maybe it's a product of the media, maybe it's a product of the changing times, maybe it's a product of tourism. I'm not quite sure, but I don't know, I forgot your question, sorry.
So I think do we want to open it up?
Can I ask?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Do you mind if I ask
Yeah.
a question?
No, it's we're
So Will,
collective here.
how are you affected by the market? So how are you, I would love to know that. Like I've seen your work up at an auction. I mean, how does that affect you personally, financially, mentally, physically? And do you remove yourself from that as an artist? I'm just curious, because here's Adam working, I mean, and I love that you're still old-fashioned and you believe in these true things, but you're still you're working a gallery. And Benjamin, you're reporting on all the things, including the marketplace. But then the internal part of it, you as the artist, how are you affected by that?
Well, basically there's a few different possible outcomes when a painting goes to auction. One is that it sells for very low. One is that it sells, and I'm talking in terms of relationship to a normal gallery price. One is that it sells way over the normal gallery price, and the other is that it just kind of sells in right about where it should be. There are down pitfalls to all those outcomes. You can have a painting do really well, and all that means is now everyone else is going to dump theirs at the next auction because they think, oh no, now it's time, because they've gone up in value. I don't know. I wish I could say that I don't pay any attention to it, but that would be a lie. I do, but it's something I have no control over, of course.
Yeah. But of course, this raises the issue that the art market is like a lot of other markets. It's only worth what someone's going to pay for it. It happens in real estate, right? Things get bid up, and and they go up, and everyone's chasing something because, oh my gosh, if I don't buy it now, it's going to, get out of my reach. And then all of a sudden something happens, and boom, it comes down again. It's not the least bit regulated, and I don't know if it would need to be regulated, but there are other markets, and people are in the world of investing. People talk a lot now about alternative investments. Stocks and bonds are volatile. They behave in one way. So sometimes you want an investment that behaves a different way. So you might buy coins. You might buy an old car. You might buy art more as an investment. They always say buy something you love. But for a lot of people, it could be an investment. But is there any sense in which the artist's ability to live and sustain a creative life would be enhanced if this market were evolving in some ways into something that is more like other markets?
Again, I'm not sure that is possible, given the way our business is structured, the way that basically it's entirely built on personal relationships and conversations that people have and effective press. It makes me wonder what would happen one day if at the Basel Art Fair all the galleries decided that they were going to get together and not report a single price to the press. I mean, what would they be writing about then?
The art itself.
Well, there would be other issues that I think are inherent in the business. I am much more interested in the disparity between the prices of art by men and art by women and artists of color. It's shocking to me sometimes that you only hear about when a work of art by a man doesn't sell, as opposed to when a work of art by a woman artist breaks a ceiling. I think even in 2014 there are terrible biases. And I think that's an area that we could really use a lot more work on, and a little bit less concerned about what something sold for this afternoon or tomorrow or next week.
Benjamin?
Yeah, I was sort of just contemplating the idea of the art market resembling the bond market. I can't think of anything more depressing, actually. I think the fact that people can't understand it and it is inexplicable is what makes it interesting. you know, so the fact that you can't quantify the value of objects, you can't even compare one painting to another painting. I mean, for reasons that remain, again, unknown to me, I'm regularly invited to speak at these conferences. In fact, there's a big hedge fund on the West Coast, big hedge fund called Canyon Partners. And they've got about $22 billion under management. And I was flown out there recently and they're considered an alternative asset management company with $22 billion under management. And so, they flew me out there to speak every year. They have this conference where they just bring in people, and they bring in really, really smart people. And I was sort of low down on the list, but was there. You know, and they were just perplexed, you know, how do we understand this? And in the end, they just thought, you know, well, it's all too complicated.
I have long since stopped trying to apply any sort of formidable economic principles to the art
Yeah,
business.
it makes no sense, yeah.
It doesn't interest me.
Yeah, I'd like to mention a slightly different tack in terms of an artist's view of their own success and place in the world. And this came up when we were talking earlier. Been in the studio all day today. Did I have a good day in the studio? No, not really. But that's really all there is. I mean, I know this is about sustaining creative life, and that involves money. If it turned out that somehow tomorrow my only option was to live in my mother's basement and make my paintings down there, my life would be, in terms of art, quite similar to the way it is now. It's the game for me, I think, and maybe I can speak for other artists too, happens in the studio, and this is mostly because this is the part we can control. This is the part that we have anything to do with. The rest, the auction houses, the dealers, you know, they'll do their thing, but for us, it's happening in the studio.
Should we open up to questions? I think it'd be a great time, and there's a eager question right there.
Do I have a really eager
Tara
question?
Fishman.
Go ahead.
Do I have to use the mic?
Sure.
Do I have to?
No.
Oh, come on.
Well, can everybody hear her? Yes, please use the
We all know
mic.
who you are.
I just want to say I feel like I'm thrilled to be here. I know some of you, and I've been around some of you, and I've heard some of you. But I come to you with my own, you know, what I am made from and what I love, and it's education and audience development. And I'm a teacher now, and I was a commercial producer at one point. And what's interesting to me, I had a daughter that just graduated as a studio art major who never had any interest. She was a singer and a performer throughout high school. But this idea of audience development and how that affects the outcome of the pricing, and also this idea of passion and what makes us love something, and what makes that, you know, how that, you see the value in that part of it, and how educating young people about the art world. And it's sure, my kids, I work in high school in Harlem, my daughter went to Riverdale, so I've seen both sides of kids that are somewhat educated, but watching them study the Renaissance and seeing how these artists were patrons, you know, patrons took care of them, and Lorenzo Medici, who comes out of nowhere and starts to love art and brings it back. And then seeing kids who never had any interest say, when can we go to the museum? And my daughter too, who now buys art and is going to be working in the industry. How do you guys feel about this idea of, I know you're a teacher, but education part of it, even as a gallery owner and artists being able to go in and turning young people on, so, you know, they make it part of their lives?
Oh, it's absolutely a part of what we do. We always have age-appropriate materials. We have many school groups come to us. We have absolutely a welcome program by which, you know, children can sit on the floor and draw a Joan Mitchell or paint a Joan Mitchell if they want. We have a program also that's organized through the Joan Mitchell Foundation, which we represent, that helps bring in students of sort of exceptional abilities who are interested in art therapy also. We do that as well. It's very much a part of what you do when you have a public art gallery. And I think that, you can't really forget that either, because if you can change somebody's mind here or there, or, you know, from the little kid who, you know, couldn't get a play date and was a terrible athlete, it changed my life. So if you don't give in this world, I don't care how rich or successful you are, you're a nobody.
I would totally agree. But I would also say that, and I think it's great that you do that, and that I know walking to Chime and Read too, you're very welcoming, which in some galleries are not. But I would say one of the reasons why I asked Kathleen to come here today and how much I love having a dialogue with Kathleen is that she has this wonderful outlet to the public. And I think that it's our responsibility in the art world. I want to bring more people to the art world, because then if more people have an interest in the arts, maybe we can get it back into education. Because right now it's not valued as much. So, like for example, the state of Kansas, I mean, K through 12 do not have consistently through the whole state arts education. They took it out. So I think that that's a major problem. And then the more that the public is not involved, the more that the art world stays a little bubble, which I actually don't care for. I think it should go out into the world. I think ArtNet should be out for everybody all over the world should access it. You know, I know that you have 690,000 followers on Twitter, which is incredible. But I'm hoping that it even expands and ArtNet can reach the public and educate the public.
Most of what we do is free. We just give it away.
Which I think is great.
I mean, the internet is an extraordinary tool for education. I mean, when most of us grew up, knowledge was concealed in books, you know, and
That's right.
you know, and you had to find the damn things. And there was a giant library there, you know, and you get there and it wasn't on the shelf. You know, so in a way, information is much more accessible today. I mean, you know this, most journalists are curious, right? They're also skeptics, and they're engaged in a kind of education as they see it. So, you know.
I can only agree.
Yeah.
There we go, another eager questioner. Give this man a mic. I can have mine here. You got it? Okay.
Can I reach between you guys? Thanks.
Okay. This is for Adam. You said that you see a lot of
Can you
Put up your mic up?
Yeah.
you said you see a lot of work by artists because of recommendations from friends and people you know. I'm wondering, I think like a lot of people here right now, how do we get a gallery owner, dealer to look at our work?
Oh my God, I'm going to die because that's the question that have been asked of me why I did this book. Before he answers that, I'm just going to interrupt for a second. Why are you asking that question?
Because I think that's what most people want to know. How do we get someone to consider our work?
I know, but why is that important?
Because how else do we get it out there?
That's the point. There are many different ways in this book that each artist shows, and a lot of the artists in the book have partnerships with a dealer. But I just wanted to point that out because I do think that question has been the sole question that has driven me crazy, because I think it's actually a burden too for dealers because they...
Well, clearly there's good work and bad work.
No, but I think it's a burden for
Everybody thinks
dealers because they can't satisfy every artist, right? Can they? I mean, you can't have 500 artists that you represent, correct?
No, we choose a pretty select group of artists, and we'd rather do a lot for a small group than, you know, try to take on every artist out there and not feel like we've been able to over-deliver.
Right.
I mean, I think it's a very interesting question, and it brings up, I think, what's a key part of Sharon's book. There are conventional routes, as we call them, by which galleries often learn about artists. One, word of mouth, as I've discussed. Group shows, wherever they may be. Seriously. And hearing about open calls and participating that way. The other way is kind of what Sharon's been absolutely brilliant about, which is making things happen for herself and taking on the system and sort of turning it on its head and saying, well, if I don't have the structure of a gallery, if I'm not going to work within this exhibition, this formal exhibition program, I'm going to go out and I'm going to get the grants, and I'm going to find out the people who are putting these shows together, and I'm going to talk to the curators, and I'm going to find out about the commission possibilities. That is a very, very difficult and very brave thing to do. But it can be done, and it has been done, and Sharon is kind of the
But there-
ideal situation of somebody who worked outside of the system to make these things happen. So there are a number of different routes that are possible. The way I would look for things, or I may walk into, say, a wall painting or a sculptural installation that Sharon's done at the Progressive headquarters. Maybe I haven't heard of Sharon Louden, but I'm going to remember that work of art, and then I can get on the internet and access information. And she made that happen herself.
Oh, thanks, that's very sweet.
Well,
Thank
it's
you
true,
for
and
that
that's what your
question.
book's about.
All right, next question.
Is there a conflict between the rebellious nature of artists and the conforming urge of society to put them into some marketable system?
That's interesting.
Not only artists, but writers and
Sure.
art in general.
It's a very good question. We are basically all inherently creative people who are former artists in one way or another. John Chime's a painter, Howard Reed is a photographer, I was a painter, for instance. So the gallery is seen as something that has to be, first and foremost, a creative enterprise. Artists should have, the artists that are selected for the gallery should have themes or threads between them that make sense, so that the sort of 1960s and 70s relationship of Linda Benglis's work, which is incredibly avant-garde, should have a relationship to the freedom of the structure of painting that Ron Gorchov created in the 70s as well, to Jack Pearson working with the found object. I think we try to allow everybody to have some relationship to another so that they don't have to be pigeonholed or seen as a commodity, and they are free to do what they want, make their mistakes, and know that as this is a marriage, we will be supportive of them. Or, you know, we worked with René Ricard, and René was a brilliant artist and a great poet, and he would make a body of work and then we wouldn't hear from him for years, but we still represented him. And then he'd write a book on poetry, which we would find out to one of the Schnabel children. And then he'd come back and he'd show up with a painting that he wanted us to put in an art fair. He's allowed the artist that kind of freedom and flexibility because the people who run the galleries and own them are inherently creative as well.
Any other, okay, there's a, it's here.
I don't know if this, you may have to walk up here, but do you mind? It's okay. Oh, no, just, well, it's okay, I don't think it goes up. Wait, there you go, there you go. Okay, now you can almost, look, it's okay, just, you can hide if you want, there you go.
I just want to tell you.
This is Teresa Chong, by the way.
She has a show up right
Terrific
now
artist.
at Denese. So.
You know, I'm a mother of 2 children, and I have a feeling that they're going to be in performance art, mostly classic music, which is very much of a dying art. And so, as I'm reading Sharon's book, and for me, they're just wonderful because there's not enough book out there about artists, and there's not anything. I mean, this is why you're probably #1, you know, really, because I think, you know, I'm an artist, you know, trying to survive, but as far as my children, you know, telling them you can't do this or not do that because there's just no money out there, I think this book is very good because I have to tell them to survive, because not necessarily, if you have the best art or if you work the hardest, there's no guarantee. It's strategizing and also finding alternative to survive. It is a very important book.
Thank you.
As a mother.
Thank you.
That's
That's very
fine.
kind. Thank you. Very sweet.
Okay, we got another question, and I think
Thank you, Kathleen.
let's see if we can.
First, oh, okay. Yeah, you're gonna have to just move out my.
That's okay, I can do that.
Thank you,
I'm okay.
Kathleen.
Well, I had a question for you, because you're talking about different ways that artists are making a living, and so I'm curious if you have diversified ways of making money. I'm curious about what other kinds of things that you personally may do.
Sure. I teach occasionally. I do take on like guest artist gigs for a day or 2 or 3 sometimes. But more relevant to the alternative funding kinds of things. and more eye-opening for me has been the process of trying to get not-for-profit situations to happen. For example, I'm known primarily as a painter, and I sell my paintings, and at the moment I do make a living doing that. But I'll get in my head that I want to do a project that's a dance, or it's a play, or something like that. Something that is going to be a money loser, in other words, and therefore needs to be funded otherwise. And that's been the difficult journey for me, is to learn about how those things happen. Though what I found is that they do happen, and if a person has an idea and they're committed enough to that idea and willing to get some no's along the way, one can ask for grants, one can ask private collectors, granting foundations, etc.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
It's okay.
Hi. So my question is, how do you quiet the noise, or all the things that are coming at you? You know, like, you should be on social media, you should have a website, you should have all these different things. I'm recently to the creative life. I've come from a corporate structure. I sustain myself that way. And when you work in a corporate world, there's a path. You go this way, you kind of know. And as an artist, you don't. And so to determine at least a path to go down for a bit to see whether that's going to be successful or not, how do you get that footing in order to know whether going for grants are right, or to be a photojournalist, or whatever, you know, is so that, how do you stop the noise, I guess, or pick the right things that are coming at you to get you going in the right direction?
My quick answer to that, I'm going to give one, is just you have to throw a lot of darts and see which ones stick. That remains true for me today.
I think you also have to figure out go into yourself, what's your work? What does your work demand? So I think the first thing that you look to know is who you are, and what I think has a lot to do with what are the goals that you have, other than just making money or surviving as an artist, but what's the context of which you want your work to exist? What do you think is right for your work? Well, who's your audience? Just thinking about those things can create a path automatically, because there's a lot of different routes you can go. And so I think paying attention to who you are, the capacity in which you can try to go to take these routes. I'm being very general because I don't know what your situation is. But also just doing a lot of research to figure out what are the places and the context that your work should be. I think research is very, very important for an artist. I think finding opportunities and finding your community is essential.
You know, just to follow up on what I said, I was thinking of the artist Weiwei and how he comes out of an entirely different environment than somebody who goes to a prestigious art school, enters into a prestigious gallery, is on the internet, you know, from Bloomberg, that these are very conflicting ways of approaching art. And I wonder whether the structure of our art system that we have here allows for the kind of audacity that you would have in a person like Weiwei.
Well, Benjamin, do you want to say?
Yeah, it's great listening to all of you, actually. I just love listening. I wanted to just say one thing, and I'll address that in a minute. I think this should actually be a really inspiring thought, that probably at no point in time has there ever been so much money and opportunity for artists.
It's very true.
Okay, so in a way, I cannot think of another moment in history where there are so many opportunities to sell work, show work.
It's very true.
Right, so you should consider yourself historically lucky. I know it mightn't feel like that. You know, I mean, it's funny you mention Ai Weiwei. You know, I know Ai Weiwei very, very well over many, many years. His circumstance is actually a little bit different. He is the son of a famous writer. His brother is a very, very famous traditional painter. So he comes from essentially an artistic royalty in China. But what most people don't know about Ai Weiwei is essentially that his values and ideas were formed by Allen Ginsberg, basically in the East Village here in New York. And the whole idea of the East Village in Beijing, where a lot of that generation, the current generation of Chinese artists, they called it the East Village, came out of Ai Weiwei's time here, basically a time in the mid to late 80s and early 90s where the East Village was a center of protest, and Allen Ginsberg would spend all day as a letter writer. Basically, he was an advocate, he was a social advocate. And Ai Weiwei's return to China and interest in the internet essentially comes out of that. He's a social advocate, and his artwork became a form, or social advocacy through the internet and Twitter became his art project as a conceptual project, right? And so I think that's a very good way of somebody who completely bypassed the gallery system, but ended up making tens of millions of dollars actually out of being a social activist. And in fact, I know this for a fact because Allen Ginsberg had on his shelf, Ai Weiwei had given him this object, and Allen's assistant still has it. I can't remember exactly what it is, but I think it's a giant black dildo. There was an artwork that Ai Weiwei made and gave to Allen, and he used to have it on the desk. So I think you're right to mention him, but it's just there are as many paths to success as there are artists in the world.
So are we, do we have more questions, or Sharon, are you gonna
Does anybody have any
sign some
questions?
books?
I just want to say that this book also has been a labor of love, that we didn't get an advance for this book, nor are we making millions of dollars from this book. This has been a labor of love, and all of these people here took their time to come here, and all of you, and I appreciate continuing this conversation, because I think there's a lot of goodwill in this, and this will go to many artists, hopefully across the country. So I really appreciate all of you being here. Thank you, Kathleen, for moderating, Benjamin, Will, and Adam for being here, and thank you all as well for your questions. Thank you, Christine.